Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Astottara Shati Shishima Vaichanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Astottara Shati Shishima Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Kota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Gaura Premanande, Hare Hare Bo. All glories to the Semal devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the Semal devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the Semal devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 3, entitled Talks Between Lord Shiva and Sati. And we are doing texts 5 to 7. I think I was asked to prepare for a different verse. Let's have a look. Anyway, I think it's similar. Okay. Tadu pasrutyanavasi Kecharanam Prajapatam Sati Dakshayani Devi Pitriyagya Mahotsavam. So that's text 5, and then there's 2 after that, but we'll just stick to text 5. But I'll read the translation for all 3. Tat upashujjanavasi Kecharanam Prajalpatam Sati Dakshayani Devi Pitriyagya Mahotsavam Tarupashujjanavasi Kecharanam Prajapatam Sati Dakshayani Devi Pitriyagya Mahotsavam. Tarupashujjanavasi Kecharanam Prajapatam Sati Dakshayani Devi Pitriyagya Mahotsavam. Tarupashujjanavasi Kecharanam Prajapatam Sati Dakshayani Devi Pitriyagya Mahotsavam. Pitriyagya Mahotsavam. Bhattadis. Tarupashujjanavasi Kecharanam Prajapatam Sati Dakshayani Devi Pitriyagya Mahotsavam. Tarupashujjanavasi Kecharanam Prajapatam Sati Dakshayani Devi Pitriyagya Mahotsavam. Tat, then, Upashrutya, hearing, Nabasi, in the sky, Kecharanam, of those who were flying in the air, the Gandharvas, Prajalpatam, the conversation, Sati, Sati, Dakshayani, the daughter of Daksha, Devi, the wife of Shiva, Pitri Yagya Maha Utsavam, the great festival of sacrifice performed by her father. Rajanti, were going, Sarvataha, from all, Digpya, directions, Upadeva Varshastriyaha, the beautiful wives of the demigods, Vimanayanaha, flying in their airplanes, Sapreshtaha, along with their husbands, Nishka Kantihi, having nice necklaces and with lockets, Suvasasaha, dressed in fine clothing, Drishtva, seen, Swanilaya Abhyashe, near her residence, Lola Akshihi, having beautiful glittering eyes, Mrishta Kundalaha, nice earrings, Patim, her husband, Bhuta Patim, the master of the Bhutas, Devam, the demigod, Otsukyat, from great anxiety, Abhyapashata, she spoke. Translation: the chaste lady Sati, the daughter of Daksha, heard the heavenly denizens flying in the sky, conversing about the great sacrifice being performed by her father. When she saw that from all directions the beautiful wives of the heavenly denizens, their eyes very beautifully glittering, were near her residence, and were going to the sacrifice dressed in fine clothing and ornamented with earrings and necklaces with lockets, she approached her husband, the master of the Bhutas, in great anxiety and spoke as follows. Purport: it appears that the residence of Lord Shiva was not on this planet, but somewhere in outer space. Otherwise, how could Sati have seen the airplanes coming from different directions towards this planet, and heard the passengers talking about the great sacrifice being performed by Daksha? Sati is described here as Dakshayani because she was the daughter of Daksha. The mention of Upadeva Vara refers to inferior demigods like the Gandharvas, Kinnaras, and Uragas, who are not exactly demigods, but between the demigods and human beings. They were also coming in planes. The word Swanilaya Vyashe indicates that they were passing right near her residential quarters. The dresses and bodily features of the wives of the heavenly denizens are very nicely described here. Their eyes moved, their earrings and other ornaments glittered, and glared. Their dresses were the nicest possible, and all of them had special lockets on their necklaces. Each woman was accompanied by her husband. Thus they looked so beautiful that Sati Dakshayani was impelled to dress similarly and go to the sacrifice with her husband. That is the natural inclination of a woman. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Read the verse once more. The chaste lady Sati, the daughter of Daksha, heard the heavenly denizens flying in the sky, conversing about the great sacrifice being performed by her father. When she saw that from all directions the beautiful wives of the heavenly denizens, their eyes very beautifully glittering, were near her residence, and were going to the sacrifice dressed in fine clothing, and ornamented with earrings and necklaces with lockets, she approached her husband, the master of the Bhutas, in great anxiety, and spoke as follows. So, I think we'll start by having a look at the context in which this verse appears. So, previously, some time back, the three personalities, it was Daksha, Marichi, and Vasishta, who were described as the leaders of universal creation. They were performing a sacrifice. And in that sacrifice, many demigods were also present, including even Lord Brahma himself. So then, while the sacrifice was happening, or about to happen, Daksha entered, who was one of the leaders of the sacrifice, and a very important person, and his effulgence is described as being like that of the sun. He was as effulgent as the sun. And so due to that and his influence, everyone stood up to respect him, to offer him respect. So in Vedic culture, that is the way one offers respect, is that one will be sitting down. When a great personality enters, then one stands up and then offers obeisances and then sits down again. So everyone stood up except for Lord Brahma, which is fine because Lord Brahma is his father, and Lord Shiva, which according to Daksha's perception was not fine, because Daksha had a bit of a problem with Lord Shiva even before this incident. He was inimical towards him and somewhat envious of him, because Lord Shiva is one of the primal demigods, or the principal demigods, which are Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, and Lord Vishnu. Of course, Lord Vishnu is not a demigod, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But they are in charge of the three, respectively, of the three modes of material nature. Lord Shiva in charge of the mode of ignorance, Lord Brahma in charge of the mode of passion, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, is in charge of the mode of goodness. So Lord Shiva is a very high position, but his, according to Daksha's vision, which was, although Daksha is somewhat of a devotee, we can see from his previous activities, but he is also quite tends to be more materialistic. And with a materialistic vision, he could not appreciate Lord Shiva, because Lord Shiva, you could say, is sort of like Avaduta type of characteristics to him. According to material vision, one may misunderstand Lord Shiva's position. For example, his dress is not very good, and his body is smeared with ashes from the crematorium. So Lord Daksha did not like Lord Shiva very much because of his dress and behavior, you could say. And therefore he was quite inimical towards him and envious that he was so respected. Daksha had Lord Shiva had been married to Daksha's daughter, Sati, and therefore Daksha felt that he should now be given respect to him. Lord Shiva should be given respect to him because he's now in an inferior position as his son-in-law. So therefore when he entered the arena, already there was some envy there and some inimical feelings, and Lord Shiva did not stand to offer respect, and he was feeling, well, he should be standing to offer respect because of his now being my son-in-law. Therefore, he became very upset. Actually, Lord Shiva is, according to material vision, may appear to be odd and so on, but those with transcendental vision, those who are with purified vision, can appreciate the position of Lord Shiva, as described by Lord Chaitanya in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Vaishnavanam yata Shambhu. Lord Shiva is the greatest of all the devotees of the Lord. And his position is so exalted, such an exalted devotee, always situated in pure love of God, always chanting the holy name of the Lord and absorbed in meditation on the Lord's form. He is always situated in ecstatic love of God and does not want anything he does not get distracted by other things. Therefore, he does not even have a residence or bother much with these sort of things. And I'll just give one pastime that I've heard, or one description that I've heard, that why Lord Shiva is described as Ashutosh, one who is very easily pleased. It's easy to please Lord Shiva and get a benediction from him, as we see with some demons often do this. And persons who worship Lord Shiva are described as being more materially opulent than those who worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the devotees of the Lord. And the reason being that Lord Shiva is simply chanting on his beads the holy name of the Lord, and it's just such a wonderful experience. He's so absorbed in ecstatic love of Krishna, chanting in this way. And then someone will come and say, excuse me, Lord Shiva, can I have a nice wife, please? Or can I have a nice husband, please? Or a nice residence, or something like that. And Lord Shiva's just like, just take it, just take whatever you want, just take it and leave me. And then he goes back to his meditation. And then again, someone comes in this way. That is why he's easily pleased, because he just wants to be absorbed in Krishna consciousness, and is not at all interested in these material things. So an intelligent person, of course, then questions that why is it that if he's so easily given these things which he's not interested in, surely there's something better. And there's a similar story Srila Prabhupada quotes in his purports with one of the Goswamis, I forget which one it was, But he had a touchstone. Does anybody remember the name of the Goswami who had the touchstone? Sanatana Goswami, yeah, I think so, yeah. And somebody heard about it and came to him to ask for it. And he said, yes, it's just there in my rubbish pile. And so the person went and got it. But then as he was walking away, he thought, hang on, why did he keep it in his rubbish pile if it's so valuable? So he went back to Sanatana Goswami, and then Sanatana Goswami explained, yes, I have something much more valuable, and he initiated him into the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. So in any event, the point is that Lord Shiva is absorbed in a different level of existence. He's concerned with much higher things and material things. That is one reason why he may appear different to persons with material vision. Although the devotees of the Lord with purified vision can very much appreciate his position as a Mahabhagavat. The other reason is that Lord Shiva is in charge of the mode of ignorance. So, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, it takes charge of persons who are in the mode of goodness, actually who are devotees of the Lord. Lord Brahma takes charge of persons who are materialistic. And Lord Shiva takes charge, being very compassionate, he takes charge of persons who are in the mode of ignorance. And he, through his association, he tries to elevate them spiritually, or gradually elevate them eventually to the spiritual platform. And when we say persons in the mode of ignorance, there are persons, there are entities which we don't have so much experience of, but there are really some really strange creatures in the mode of ignorance. Bhutas and ghosts and hobgoblins and all these kind of creatures which are attracted to places, for example, like graveyards and dead bodies and all these horrible things. So there are such creatures out there in the universe, and even them, Lord Shiva, what to speak of persons in the mode of ignorance in our realm of existence, but even much more degraded entities, Lord Shiva takes charge of them and gradually tries to elevate them through his association. So he's so much compassion, and therefore you will see he's sometimes doing these things, strange behavior, to connect with these types of entities. But internally he is fully absorbed on the highest platform of pure love of God in pure devotional service. And he's not at all affected by these things. So, Daksha, however, with materialistic vision, could not appreciate this, and he was particularly perturbed that he had married his daughter, who he felt was, like the apple of his eye and all that. And now this personality, whom he considered to be quite low, had married her, and even after that not offering him respect, even though he's his son-in-law. So this was the situation. Daksha then became very upset and began cursing Lord Shiva. First he began insulting Lord Shiva in public, in the assembly of all these great personalities, great rishis, sages and demigods and ancestors, including Lord Brahma himself. His pride was such, and he was not able to control his mind, and he just began insulting Lord Shiva. And there's quite a few verses where he insults Lord Shiva, and they're quite, it's really bad, actually. I'll just read one. So this is just to give you an idea. He lives in filthy places like crematoriums, and his companions are the ghosts and demons. Naked like a madman, sometimes laughing and sometimes crying, he smears crematorium ashes all over his body. He does not bathe regularly, and he ornaments his body with a garland of skulls and bones. Therefore, only in name is he Shiva, or auspicious. Actually, he is the most mad and inauspicious creature Thus he is very dear to crazy beings in the gross mode of ignorance, and he is their leader. So you see his vision of the whole thing. Srila Prabhupada explains in that purport, actually Lord Shiva is the most auspicious because he's elevating such persons who are in the mode of ignorance through his association. And so he really, for quite a few verses, insults Lord Shiva really badly, and then leaves the sacrifice. So in this way we can see, one lesson we can learn from this is the danger of envy and also the danger of anger. Following, we'll get to that now, but following Lord Shiva's leaving, Daksha's leaving, Nandishvara, Lord Shiva's principal follower, stood up to defend his master, which he was right in doing that, but what he was not right in doing, Prabhupada explains, was to curse the Brahmanas present. Because Daksha had cursed Lord Shiva and left. And so Nandishvara, feeling that these Brahmanas present were probably feeling quite happy. They didn't say anything because they were probably feeling quite happy that Lord Shiva was cursed. They were probably in any event feeling inimical towards him and quite happy to see him cursed. Therefore Nandishvara stood up and out of anger he cursed the Brahmanas present. And then Bhrigu Muni, the leader of the Brahmanas present, he stood up out of anger and cursed the followers of Lord Shiva. So cursing and counter-cursing was going on. And when such personalities curse, there's actually an effect. It does actually happen. They're that powerful. So Lord Shiva then began feeling very morose. He stood up and left the assembly, and all his followers went, because he felt that these persons are all absorbed in unnecessarily material ideas and just unnecessarily absorbed in the material bodily concept of life, forgetting the real aim of life. And better that I leave so that this cursing and counter-cursing can stop, otherwise it will just continue. So this was going on, and so what we can learn from this is the danger of envy and anger. So envy, let's look at envy first. So we may ask, where does this envy come from? Sometimes we may find ourselves just naturally wanting to feel inimical and envious towards someone, just for no apparent reason. It's almost like we're looking for someone to be envious about. So we may ask, where does this come from, this tendency? That comes from the fact that originally we're envious of Krishna, and that is why we've come to the material world. We felt, why should Krishna be the controller and the enjoyer? I want to take that position. So out of envy we feel this way and come to the material world. And everyone in material existence, except for the pure devotees who have come here for a different reason, but generally speaking, every conditioned soul in material existence is envious, because that's why we're in material existence. We wouldn't be in material existence if we weren't envious. So therefore we should not feel surprised when this envy arises in our heart. And the only way to overcome it is to overcome our envy of Krishna. Because when one is situated in love of Krishna, then one also has love for all Krishna's parts and parcels, who are all the other living entities. So through chanting the holy name, one purifies one's heart gradually of that anartha of envy, and one comes to the position, the liberated position, where one is no longer envious of Krishna or any other living entity. But it's very dangerous. It's a very dangerous trait that we have to be aware of. And the other danger is anger. Srila Prabhupada explains in the purpose to these verses that anger can actually make a person go mad. And I think we all have experienced that if our anger is not... Sometimes we become so angry that we almost we could just do anything. I'm saying we all have, at least at one point in our life, had that experience. Maybe we did that anything, or maybe we some other controlled it, but we felt it that we could just do anything right now, break anything, or throw anything, or harm someone. Maybe even that often happens in this material world. So I'll just give a little story from my family history, because I feel it illustrates this point really well. That my grandmother's sister, I'm not sure what you would call that, great aunt maybe. She at one stage was married. Must have been in her 30s, or late 30s maybe, and her husband was quite abusive. I think even to some extent physically abusive. And so it just eventually she had to leave him. It became too much for her to cope with. And now, of course, this is in a small, just a regular small town back in South Africa. And so she left him, and they had a divorce. And he, being a man in his late 30s, having those desires, he quickly entered into another relationship with another woman. But the only problem was that new woman now was already married. So in other words, she was now having an affair with this man. So the husband of that woman found out about it. And somehow or other he got my great aunt's number, now the ex-wife of this man's number. And he also found out where this, man works and everything like that. And he called my ex-aunt and told her that he's found out that her ex-husband is having an affair with his wife, and he's going to go, kill him, shoot him. And of course she still, it's her ex-husband, she still cares for him, So she was trying to call him on the phone to warn him, because this man's on his way. Those days there was no cell phones, there was only landlines, so she's calling his work number, and for some reason he wasn't answering his phone at the work. Maybe he was in a meeting or something. And in the meantime, this man arrives at his work, enters his office, takes out his gun and shoots him at point blank, shoots him in the head, and that was the end of him. And then shoots himself. So this is what anger can do. So when Prabhupada says anger can make you mad, it can make you crazy, it really is true. So that poor woman now lost both her husband and her so-called lover, and at least from a certain, you could kind of say it was pretty much her fault, the whole thing. So to some extent, anyhow. So, but anyway, it illustrates what anger can do. There's really nothing that we couldn't do when we're angry enough. And Daksha really was really, really angry. So he really destroyed himself with this insulting Lord Shiva, such a great personality, and cursing him. And then the cursing and counter-cursing of the followers that went on afterwards is still being felt today. The Brahmanas, the position Brahmanas are in today, like the caste Brahmanas and so on, being fallen and all that sort of thing. The position of also Lord Shiva's followers today, it's all the result of that cursing that went on in that sacrifice. Srila Prabhupada explains this in the purports. So this is what anger can do if we don't control it. So how do we deal with anger? Anger is due to association with the mode of ignorance. So when we associate with the modes of material nature, then we become subjected to all these things: lust, anger, envy, madness, fear and illusion. So the only way to become free from all these bad qualities is to take shelter of the devotional service of the Lord, because when we absorbed in devotional service, then we're no longer associated with the modes of material nature. Indeed, we transcend the three modes of material nature. As Krishna describes in Bhagavad Gita, Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatitjaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. That when one engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, he at once transcends the three modes of material nature and comes to the level of Brahman, comes to the spiritual platform by engaging in devotional service. So these are some things to be, some lessons we can learn from the historical context of this pastime that's taken place. Let us now have a look at today's verse. This is the third and final point I'd like to make in this class. That we learn from this pastime and these interactions we are seeing now and going to be seen between Lord Shiva and Sati, his wife Sati, how everything is personal, or how personal everything actually is. Just consider here we have Sati, who is Durga Devi, the material energy personified, and she's interacting with Lord Shiva, who is in charge of the mode of ignorance. And so such personal dealings are going on. It's described, Srila Prabhupada even ends the purport by saying that is the natural inclination of a woman. That when a woman sees her relatives and friends and so on go into a big event and dressed nicely in jewelry and so on, then she also wants to go. May be hard for us men to understand, but I'm sure the ladies can relate that there's some that natural inclination is there. Of course, we can relate to Daksha and how the pride he's feeling and so on. That is the male conditioning. And maybe we can empathize with Lord Shiva, his position, those of us who are married, of having to deal with difficult situations that marriage can, the complicated affairs of married life, you could say. But it's interesting that all that is going on in such a high level of existence, the material energy personified, and we may be inclined to think of something like the material energy personified as being just kind of impersonal or some kind of a force or something like that. And indeed, the qualities of persons on this platform is definitely way beyond what we experience on this level of existence. Sometimes the example can be given of an ant. What does the ant know about Auckland, even though it's living in Auckland? What could it really know about Auckland and just anything really? But we, on a high level of existence as a human being, we know so much more. We have such a different high level of experience. So similarly, there are entities above us also who have a much higher level of experience and so on, and that the demigods, and here we're talking about the principal demigods, Lord Shiva. So it's really a high level of existence, yet at the same time we can see how personal it still is. They are still persons. And indeed, we wouldn't want to not be persons. We want to have all these personal dealings and interactions, and we want to feel all these personal characteristics. Similarly, so do persons on this level, even though we're speaking about the material energy personified, in charge of this whole material existence, still Sati is a person and has personal characteristics. Similarly, the Supreme Absolute Truth is personal. Ultimately, the source of everything is personal. and has personal characteristics. The difference between the characteristics of us here on the material level and the Supreme Absolute Truth is that the Supreme Absolute Truth, Krishna, has his personal characteristics and interactions are all Satchit Ananda. They're not a result of the three modes material nature like ours are. They're all full of knowledge, full of bliss and eternal, and they are all in perfection. So all emotions and activities and so on are in perfection in the spiritual world and in pure love. And so similarly, our original condition is also like that in relation to Krishna, that is, that we have all personal characteristics in perfection. Sometimes persons become impersonally inclined for spiritual realization because they're afraid. We've all had such a bad experience in material life of personal interactions and being a person, that we may think, in fact it's a natural inclination in the beginning to think of spiritual existence and spiritual perfection as being impersonal, just because of our experience of being persons in this world. Therefore it's important for us to hear, to read, for example, Nectar of Devotion, which demonstrates to us the supreme perfection of personal dealings in the spiritual world, how we have personalism and personal interactions in perfection, in pure love, so that we can be attracted to that. So that's the third point I wanted to make, how everything is actually personal. The source of everything is personal, the supreme source is personal and all attractive, and everything coming down from that, all the different levels coming down are personal. We can close and open our eyelids because a person is allowing that to happen. We can speak because a person is allowing that to happen. There's air for us to breathe because a person is making that air available for us. There's water to drink because a person's making that available to us. There's sunlight and warmth because a person is making that available for us. Everything is personal, which may be we're so conditioned, especially in Western's upbringing, I would suggest, we've been quite impersonally conditioned to think of everything in an impersonal way, that it may take time to adjust to this idea that everything is actually personal. There's nothing impersonal at all. And the reason being because the supreme source of everything is a person, Krishna, the supreme all-attractive person. Okay, so that's the third point I wanted to make in terms of today's class. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Any comments or questions? Yes, Ru. What can an ant know about Auckland? What can an Aucklander know about an ant? What do you mean? Yeah, I guess that's true to some extent. We've all been ants, so we've experienced that before. But what we do know from Shastra is that entities in the animal forms and insect forms are very much covered over. Their consciousness is very much covered over. Their experience is very limited and covered over. Generally, they think in terms of what's favorable and unfavorable for my sense gratification, and just kind of in a very simple way like that. Like, for example, a tree. We wouldn't be able to stand like a tree is for so many years just standing there. A tree can do it because it's so much covered over by the mode of ignorance that it's able to just stay like that. Another example is the baby in the womb. It is said in the Srimad Bhagavatam that up until 7 months, the baby is pretty much unconscious. Only after from the 8th month on does it become conscious, and then so it has 2 or 3 months of really like being aware of its suffering, and it really suffers badly. But the first 7 months it's quite covered over. So you can see that entities lower than human beings also, they're so covered over, therefore they don't have much experience of things. But the higher you go, the more conscious the entities are, especially the higher beings like the demigods, very, very conscious and aware. Is that okay? Any other comments or questions? Yes, Robert?
I like the last point, how you talk about how everything's personal. And as you mentioned, depending on our upbringing, especially if you've had a Western upbringing, it may be very difficult to adjust to this concept. We've had no religious background and been trained in scientific understanding of things. So, how do we overcome these constant barriers that come up? Because every time you read something, it's like, that doesn't make sense because you're thinking in a certain way.
Yeah.
So it's not just the information, but it's just like the default to like reject things just because this is the way I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you adjust that thinking?
Yeah.
The knowledge of the reading?
Yeah. If we hear Srimad Bhagavatam, then by regularly hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, then our intelligence becomes rewired, you could say. We become purified of all of these things, all of these conditionings that we have due to being in material existence. They all gradually kind of work themselves out of our system, and we can properly see the material world in a proper way. The only way is to regularly hear Srimad Bhagavatam. It purifies our intelligence. Yeah, it's like I was reading couple of weeks ago about the 5th canto about the sun, how it's been pulled by a chariot, and there's 60,000 sages offering prayers, facing the sun god, offering prayers, and this and that, and each of the months is controlled. Each of the months is actually a person, and I was just feeling it coming out so much. It's so personal. It's too personal. The seasons, each of the seasons is a person. Each of the months is a person. I think even each of the days of the year is a person. It's like, no, there's have been so many persons involved. I just don't want to merge into an impersonal void. That's what we want, really. Yeah. So we're contaminated by this conditioning. At the same time, it's very refreshing to know that actually everything is personal, that it's not just this impersonal nothingness out there. Everything is actually a person. Especially because the Supreme Person is Krishna. That's what we really want, is to connect again with Krishna. So yeah, Srila Prabhupada's pranam mantra says, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Deshatani. The Western countries are filled with impersonalism and voidism. And Srila Prabhupada is Gauravani Pracharya, preaching Lord Chaitanya's message that by chanting Hare Krishna we can overcome all of this and become happy again in the devotional loving service of Krishna. Re-establish our loving relationship with Krishna. And it's really, what's really struck me about the 5th canto, reading it again this time, what really struck me was about, what stood out for me, I think, was how the whole universe is centered around Krishna consciousness, actually. Those who know anything, really, anyone who's on some kind of a higher position and knows anything, they're really concerned with devotional service to Krishna. That's the 7 planets with the great sages on. The personalities each of those great sages on in charge, like the leaders of those 7 planets, the Ganges water flows because the Ganges water is coming from the feet of Lord Vishnu, so it's prasadam, so that's flowing, and they're just sitting in meditation on the Supreme Lord, chanting His name, meditating on His form, engaged in His devotional service, and keeping that Ganges water on their head, and that's just what they're doing. That's just what they're concerned about. And He was described, it's described with matted hair. They've absorbed in meditation with matted hair, keeping their hair always wet with the Ganges water. So why is their hair matted? Because they just they don't want to waste any time. They just want to keep all their time they don't want to waste a minute. Of course, they bathe in 3 times in the Ganges, so they clean and all that, but they're not bothering to style their hair and this and that. There's 2 ways that the transcendentist deals with hair. It's described. One is to shave it off, like the devotees do in Lord Chaitanya's movement. Shave, just of course leave the seeker to show that one's devoted to the Supreme Lord. But other than that, just shave it off. And the other way is, which we don't do, but it can be done, is just to let it grow. Just don't deal with it, So they're using that method, and they just, fully absorbed. So those who are in knowledge, they know. That's anyone who's in any kind of knowledge or any kind of higher position. That's just all they're concerned about is devotional service to Krishna. So we're so fortunate to have that knowledge and understanding and we can learn, seeing these great personalities. We can, if they just concerned with that, I better, this is a really good thing to be concerned about and focused on. But what really struck me was how personal everything is, because Dhruva Loka, of course Dhruva is in the same, he's one of those persons doing the same thing, just absorbed in Krishna consciousness, not interested in anything else. And he's such an exalted devotee that the whole reason why everything's, why all the planets are moving and like that, is that the reason is because they circumambulate in Dhruva Loka. Because Dhruva is such an exalted devotee. Because circumambulate means you're offering obeisances from all directions. That's like when we go around Tulsi Devi, we're offering obeisances from all directions. So that's what they're doing. They just circumambulate in Dhruva Loka. That's why everything's turning. So how personal a reason is that? The whole conclusion of understanding that everything is personal is that Krishna is a person, and that we simply want to serve Krishna and reconnect with Him. Anything else? Yes, Rup.
You mentioned in your class, and you also hear quite often, how envy of other living entities that stems from our original envy towards Krishna.
Yeah.
I was wanting to know, because when we are feeling envy towards a particular individual, our envy is, for our point of view, is directed towards them. Krishna is a really good action. And for most of our lives, we have been envious towards others. We haven't even known who Krishna is.
Yeah.
How is that envy of other living entities actually is connected to the envy of Krishna?
We may have noticed how temporary that the enviness is. Have you noticed that? And sometimes you even see in this pastime, Sati gets really angry with Lord Shiva because he doesn't want to go to the yagya, and she's like burning him with her eyes, and then not long after she's directing that towards her father and commits suicide because her father's offended Lord Shiva. And so it's like we don't really know where to direct the envy or where it's coming from. We don't remember where it's coming from or who we're meant to direct it to, but so we just kind of some other find someone to be envious about for some other reason, and sometimes it can be a whole race group, this particular race group. We've seen so many examples in history of that, and even today it's still going on. You just got to direct your envy somewhere. It's there already in the heart because we're envious of Krishna. We don't know where it's come from. We just know that it's there, and we just got to find someone to direct it to. We've forgotten Krishna altogether, so we just find someone else to direct the envy to. Yeah. Yeah, right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.